Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here with Ryan, our wonderful Director of Finance Research here at Micro One. And we're really excited to just chat a little bit about what we're seeing as we work with a lot of different companies in the financial domain from Fortune 500s of the world to finance-focused AI startups and other companies just implementing AI into their own financial processes. And so, Ryan, I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ryan Charnov. I'm the Director of Finance Research here at Micro One. I'm really excited to chat today. So just for some background on the reason for putting this together, I sit kind of personally at the intersection of finance professionals and enterprise customers. And so in a lot of my conversations, we've found that there's just this huge disconnect between the headlines that you see in the news and the mandates that exist in the workplace to adopt AI and the ways that AI are actually being adopted in the workforce. So we wanted to put something together to not just discuss our thoughts on it, but also have some kind of numbers and actually kind of test some of our theses. So before jumping into some of the numbers and talking about it, we'd love to run a quick poll. So how many people on this call work for a firm where there is an explicit mandate to use AI? So we'll give you guys a second to collect answers here. While answers are rolling in, I'll just give you the answer that we saw, which is about 50% of firms that we talk to have some sort of mandate to implement AI in the workplace. However, only 3% are actually using autonomous agents. So as we think about kind of 2026 being the year of real world autonomous workflows, there's a lot of work that needs to happen to kind of bridge this gap. When I talk to leaders about how they're measuring, ROI on agentic use cases, we really don't even have the infrastructure to do so in a lot of cases. So our opinion is that there's kind of three barriers that have been holding this back, and we'll talk about each one in more detail. So one is evals, two is token economics, and three is safety and compliance. So, to understand what is kind of causing some of this frustration between those who are trying to implement AI and those who kind of are on the front lines, it's important to understand the kind of trust gap that we see. So, in our poll, about half of professionals are really only using AI for kind of basic one-off questions. So, this could be looking up a deal document. This could be writing emails. These are things that are obviously value add, but do not reflect kind of the real world capabilities of what an end-to-end process looks like. The next is just this lack of confidence in reliability of AI outputs. So only 24% of those that we spoke with mentioned that they are very confident in the reliability of AI to replicate their workflows. So we actually want to poll the audience real quick to see how many of you are confident in that. And we'll send out the answers to this in our follow-up email. I suspect that we will see kind of similar answers to what we had previously seen in our poll, which is professionals just don't trust AI to do their kind of full workflow. And when you think about autonomous agents, so agents that are working, 24/7 across the long horizon domains, this is really, really a problem because if you want to kind of turn on an agent that is responding to customer queries or that is doing, a lot of work, you really have to feel strong that the work is quality. Last thing is something that non-technical folks sometimes struggle with, which is the concept of non-deterministic outputs. So to put this in really simple language, when you have a prompt that you give to an LLM, the answer that you receive is not always the exact same. And so there are some instances where this is expected, right? In financial modeling, if you give 100 analysts a model, you expect some kind of natural variation in terms of the techniques used and the answer they get. There are other outputs. So think of like tax or anything regulatory, where it is extremely, extremely important that you get kind of the same answer every single time. So there's a fundamental disconnect that many of our kind of finance experts face, where they expect agents to give them the exact same answer, but they're not really kind of clear on the limitations, and as such, they're a little dissatisfied with the results. So really quickly before diving into our thesis, just wanted to talk through the experts that we surveyed. So we talked to 63 experts working across a variety of fields. Most of these are on the buy side in some capacity. So, hedge fund, private equity, or some kind of sell side bankers. A mix of seniority level between probably a third of the experts who are what I'd say are doing the analyst and associate work, and about 40% who are checking work, as well as some MDs and directors who are more involved with kind of putting AI policy in place. Then a majority of our experts were involved in some capacity in deal execution. So the reason we thought it was really important to talk to folks who are in kind of buy side roles is if you see the headlines, this is where a lot of early stage agentic use case is. So really wanted to talk to the folks who are actually underwriting AI in the workplace. And as you can see, a lot are not very confident in AI. So now that we've kind of established the problem, which is this huge disconnect between the need for AI and the actual use case, wanted to talk through what some barriers are and how we can solve this. The first is in evaluation gap. So quick poll, how many of you guys actually work at firms where there are structured evals put in place before deploying AI? And while that loads, we'll let you know that only about a third of the firms that we surveyed actually have kind of a structured process in place to evaluate their outputs. So a few things that are really interesting to talk about here. One is, if you're going to put out an agent in the workforce, especially in finance domains where there's, a lot of trust and where there's a lot of money and regulatory restrictions, you have to be very certain about what the output that you will receive is. And then second, if you're investing significant capital into agentic workflows, you have to have a structured process for measuring the kind of ROI on your investment. So many firms that we talk to kind of, they'll test a workflow, but they won't specifically look into, multiple dimensions of performance. So they might say that we have an agent that is cutting time to get an answer by 20%, but they don't really view kind of the full spectrum of what the agent is doing and how that is developing into a business case that they can underwrite. The second problem with kind of lack of evaluations is LLMs kind of change over time, right? So every time a new model comes out, you don't want your agent to have, different responses to customers or any of your workflows to be disrupted. So it's extremely important that in the pre-production phase, there is kind of a structured process through which we are testing agents, looking at the full distribution of outputs that could come and kind of aligning, but then also in the actual production phase that we are constantly evaluating the agentic workflows to make sure that the responses are in line with the intended use case. So one prediction that we kind of have for this space is we're going to see a lot of firms who roll out agents for the sake of doing so, and then find that there are huge unintended consequences of agents that haven't been fully tested or fully vetted. So as we move into a space where these agents are requiring significant capital, it's extremely important that we have kind of a strong use case for their ROI and a strong understanding of how they're operating in the real world. The second is one that really isn't talked about a lot, and this is the concept of data economics. So, about half of firms don't even track their AI token usage at all. And if you think about the way that AI is used in the workplace now, that kind of makes sense because, asking simple questions or getting simple responses doesn't really use a lot of tokens, and a lot of firms are on, business plans where for these types of workflows, you don't really, use many tokens, and you don't kind of get into, the variable cost. That said, when you go from asking a simple question to conducting a full workflow, so think about, creating a SIM or, doing something that requires multiple use cases throughout multiple workflows. So going from Excel to PowerPoint to Word, the amount of tokens you use can go up exponentially. And firms don't even have infrastructure in place to track how much tokens they're using, or how their model design impacts token usage. So one of our kind of key predictions that we think we'll see this year is some firms that kind of unintentionally have an analyst, spending tens to hundreds of thousands on tokens without even understanding, why or how. So, as part of our kind of commitment to evals, we also look at how the model is using tokens and efficiently getting to the right answer, so that customers and clients actually understand, what the variable cost of running an agent is. So, I think that tokens are kind of one of the largest untracked expenses that managers aren't even looking at, and we predict that will change over the course of the next year. And lastly is safety and compliance. So this is a quick changing field, and most of the firms that we talk to don't really have a specific policy in place for how they are handling AI usage, how they are ensuring safety, or what needs to be done to make sure that the outputs of their agents are in line with both kind of regulatory as well as internal guidelines. So this is an area that we think will change a lot over the next year, as agents roll out from kind of 3% to a much higher percent deployment. And it's extremely important in the finance setting that is highly regulatory, that touches customers' financial accounts, that we have a very strong sense of compliance, both from kind of a KYC and AML perspective, as well as just for a basic kind of understanding of how the workflows work perspective. So when you are structuring evals, it's critically important that safety and compliance is part of your evals and not something that you do after the fact. So our third kind of prediction is that we will see a lot more emphasis on compliance as part of the early stages of implementing AI, and not something that's done after. So I know I spoke for a lot there on the challenges and what we see when talking with clients. And I'll let Izzy kind of take over to talk about how we kind of take those challenges and turn them into solutions for some of our clients.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. That's great. I'm still, it's fun to do these surveys just given the breadth of people that we work with and picking up on all the trends. I constantly find it so fascinating. So, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest takeaways here is really around the concept of trust in production AI. There's so many teams that are shipping out AI initiatives or planning around their AI goals. But what we're seeing is that confidence really drops quickly once these systems are going live and are touching real workflows, engaging with real customers, controls, regulatory requirements, whatever it might be. So just to bring this to life a little bit, as you said, I wanted to talk about the way that we're working with a lot of these companies through our Cortex platform, which is our enterprise offering, to really create trusted, reliable systems. So we first partner with these companies. An approach that we take is truly one of partnership in the sense of real technical research from our team to define and align on what a customer's goals are. So, what are the real financial workflows that this agent might be engaging in or expected to perform? And this is the stage at which we really construct these contextual eval frameworks that are grounded in real world scenarios and guided by real experts to help understand the behavior and the health of these systems, which leads us to the second part of this process usually, which is in where we actually conduct the evaluation. So you can really think of this as a diagnosis for your system in testing its performance across real scenarios, edge cases, engaging with whatever regulatory constraints there might be to really identify where, why, when, how these systems are breaking, and more importantly, where you cannot trust them in production today. And so this produces a really clear bill of health, school report, if you will, to understand where these systems are not behaving or not reliable or not accurate, whatever it might be that you're measuring, and gives you a really clear roadmap to then improve these systems with targeted data for training. And so throughout this process, we work really closely with domain experts, experts who might be investment bankers or financial planners, wealth management specialists, so on and so forth. The people who have really lived and breathed these workflows day in and day out. And so they can pick up on the little nuances that are important for these agents to replicate in their behavior. And so that's what we bake into these data sets after we identify the areas in which the system needs to be improved. And I think what's really important to understand and what we're seeing and learning ourselves is the concept of monitoring and having a line of sight and visibility into these systems over time. And in this world, the one thing we know is that there is so much change. There's constantly new tools, there's new policies, you might have new customers, whatever it might be. So it's so important to regularly evaluate and reevaluate these systems as your business is evolving to understand exactly how they're behaving as these different nuances or edge cases might come up. And then you can continue to fill in the gaps over time. So that was a little bit of a mouthful, but just to reiterate, I think it's so important to really have experts at the heart of these processes, people who understand how these, tasks are supposed to be conducted, and really aligning on your business goals to make sure that your AI systems are replicating them. So just to bring this to life a little bit, wanted to walk through an example of a pipeline we've been working on with a really fun client that I fortunately cannot name, but this engagement really focused on evaluating whether their agent could perform real world financial research. And, rather than just focusing on evaluating it on static data or synthetic data or generic benchmarks, we built an evaluation system that was expert authored human data, driven by over 1,000 finance research tasks designed around these real world workflows. And so, the complexity here is that the agent is expected to navigate, SEC filings, 10Ks, so on and so forth, and really have this, and pull together multi-step reasoning, perform calculations, synthesize information, a whole slew of tasks. And so what this evaluation surfaced was critical failure modes in multi-document reasoning, financial modeling workflows that otherwise didn't appear in more traditional benchmark testing. And so once we were able to uncover those insights, the team was actually able to reduce their unsupported responses and major reasoning errors by a really significant amount. And more conceptually, they really gained a measurable way to evaluate and assess their, agentic health over time. So this is just one example of the many pipelines we're working on. And I think we have another one as well we can chat through. Or do
One,
you have
just
any?
one quick thing. Sorry to jump in. We got
Oh,
a
go
question
ahead.
in the chat that I think is applicable here, and I can answer. Is just when you identify failure mode in an agent, how do you catch it? How do you categorize it? And is this something that is caught by experts or agents themselves? So I thought this would be a good area to talk about that. So, for example, if you are just looking at the output of a research agent like this and you see, you ask a question and you get a response that's clearly wrong, that's obviously a challenge and you kind of lose confidence in the underlying model. And from a user perspective, you don't really care what happened on the back end. From an enterprise perspective, it's super important that you understand, did the agent just, not parse a PDF correctly? Does it not know how to, calculate enterprise value? Does it not know how to, move something between PDF and Excel? And so what we do in our evals is kind of a combination of catching all errors, which can be done through looking at kind of the chain of reasoning, and then aligning between both kind of technical members as well as finance experts to categorize these errors so that we can give a very clear view of what the strengths and weaknesses in your model and workflow is. So I spend a lot of time actually talking with technical folks about, if an agent is really bad at taking something out of a PDF, is that very important versus, if it doesn't understand the difference between calendarization and fiscal year and more kind of structural finance concepts. So anyway, we spend a lot of time and thought in categorizing these so that you have a very clear sense of what is causing failure and a very clear game plan for how you can fix and improve your models. Sorry, Izzy, I'll give it back to you to talk through the next case.
No, that was super helpful. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so this is more of an ongoing project, but we have been working with Microsoft to help evaluate and improve, again, on a more continuous monitoring basis, an accountant digital worker that operates inside of Copilot. So, starting from the beginning, their goal was to really ensure this agent or this coworker could reliably handle real accounting workflows instead of, just performing well on generic accounting prompts. And so we recruited and assembled a really specialized accounting experts team along with our human data operations team to build a very domain specific evaluation framework here, grounded in, again, real accounting documentation and workflows. And so for each document set, we created structured queries paired with golden responses across a wide range of task complexity. So simple, medium, very highly complex accounting scenarios. And the deliverable in this example was a data set of 150 very high signal tasks that are used to deeply assess the agent's behavior, surface reliability gaps, and improve performance across these really high stakes accounting tasks. And so while, more specific outcomes and data points are still underway, they have really established a really strong and confident and reliable way to evaluate this system and ultimately produce a more production ready coworker whose behavior really reflects day-to-day accounting practices and meets enterprises expectations for accuracy. So it's another fun one. And so we'll open it up to take some more questions. There's been a couple that have been coming through the chat, but we also wanted to offer just a little bit, more of an intimate conversation, as intimate as these webinars might be. If you wanted to have, a one-on-one strategy session with our research team, ask more questions live, we'd love to meet and chat in more depth about this. So now we can take some questions. Let's see.
I can read one for you, Izzy, if that's okay, and then we can both answer. So one question we got is, are there specific industries where we've seen best-in-class adoption? And are there industries that have done a better job of kind of cracking the path to adoption?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm curious, Ryan, your thoughts on, in more the finance world. But it's interesting because at Micro One, we don't only work with, financial businesses or financial oriented companies. We work with companies across a very wide range of industries, from things like construction to, healthcare, of course, law, all over. And so what we're seeing is the thing that we're seeing that's actually really interesting is that this concept of reliability and trust is where actually everybody is struggling today. And I think in industries like finance and healthcare and law, where there's, perhaps some already structured static data that is really ripe for AI automation, naturally these industries are adopting AI rather quickly. But regardless of the industry, what we're seeing time and time again is this question of how do we ensure that our agents are performing in production, and how can we see this as well, aside from having one of our own employees go through all of the output. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of, adoption and where the different industries are at. But Ryan, I'm curious if there's anything, any more niches within the financial world that come to mind for you.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and then I'll also talk about a second question that's related of, the use cases that have been most effective. We obviously are not going to share anything sensitive about what specific customers are working on, but
Mhm.
speaking broadly, back office types of finance roles or back office types of workflows that are used internally seem to be ones that perform better on evals. Part of that is due to kind of the, recurring nature of the workflows. So workflows that you can think of as being clearly structured are a lot easier to build agents for. The ones that we've seen kind of be a little bit more challenging are ones that involve kind of more decision making and trust. So if you think about things like kind of projecting, financials forward, or underwriting investments from a full kind of workflow perspective, those are things that are pretty challenging. We're actually coming out with some research soon, so I don't want to jump the gun on it too much. But one of the initial findings that we've done through some research that I've been looking at is we found that one of the key areas that agents tend to fail are areas that require capital allocation and that involve kind of investment decisions, which is obviously a big challenge because if you are failing in your capital allocation decisions, there's huge ramifications. So that is an area where we think there'll be a lot of trust building yet to come.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question here. I think this is an interesting one on compliance and how you can work to make sure that your agentic systems are staying compliant over time. So, Ryan, I know this is a huge topic in finance.
Yeah,
So many regulations. So curious on your thoughts here.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, highly regulated fields are ones that we need to be very careful and sure about before deploying. So the biggest thing is starting with evals up front that include kind of the full spectrum of the team. So I think a lot of enterprises kind of build or tend to build on the more like data science or coding heavy side, but don't always bring in the real world users into the build. So having the right kind of compliance and regulatory people involved in the evals process up front is critical. And then second is just really long form and structured evals, such that we are determining exactly what types of rules models try to break, and understanding the back end of why before we go into production. And then third is constant evals testing for specific edge cases. You want to be constantly checking your regulatory requirements and making sure that agents are not, violating any rules and system prompts. So the short answer is it's a kind of consolidated approach from kind of the beginning through the deployment stage that needs to be properly and carefully managed.
Yeah, and relatedly, another question that came in, we can take this as the last one, but it's just on a very related topic. What's one of the worst things that could happen to a firm or a company that deploys agents without evals? And do you think that enterprises today are aware of these risks?
Yeah, so I think obviously the most important thing would be a lack of compliance or regulatory breach is super important and could be a major challenge that has implications beyond the specific workflow. So there's that, and then the other thing is when you are doing evals, a lot of companies might only evaluate a model on 20 or 25 responses and don't really understand that there's a large spectrum of possible responses and a large spectrum of possible both inputs and outputs. So if you are not testing on large amounts of use cases and then you're deploying to a setting that involves thousands or millions of interactions, the probability of getting an interaction that is like a three standard deviation type of event is actually pretty high. So to bring that into, I guess, less technical terms, um, firms that deploy too quickly or don't have a full understanding can lose confidence, not just with like regulatory bodies, but also customers, and can also lose kind of internal kind of capabilities and internal uh, deployment of AI into other settings. So we've talked to some people who have tried an AI agent, have not been happy with the results and have just stopped deploying capital to doing so. So you can actually set your organization back a fair amount by rushing and by putting things out there that are not production ready.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We'll let you all get on with your busy days, but we are constantly having these types of conversations internally and with our partners that we work with. So if you want to chat more, we'd love to hear from you and answer any other questions or hear, any other thoughts that you might have to some of the questions that were brought up today. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to chatting with you all and seeing what you are building.